March 17, 1943, Turpitzufer 76-78, Berlin. A file struck the mahogany desk with a sound like a gunshot. The impact jolting Admiral Wilhelm Canaris's porcelain cup and sending a splash of coffee across intelligence briefs that carried a death sentence if the Gestapo ever saw them. Impossible, the thought screamed in his mind. The Americans are weaving a tapestry of propaganda using our own turned agents. Beyond the towering windows of the Abwehr headquarters, Canaris could gaze upon the Landwehr Canal, the very same waters that had swallowed Rosa Luxemburg's body 24 years prior. Now, as the chief of German military intelligence, he felt the weight of a report in his trembling hands that defied not only the carefully constructed narratives of Nazi propaganda, but the very mathematical bedrock of Germany's path to victory. Intercepted signals and dispatches from loyal agents in Mexico City all told the same unbelievable story. Ford Motor Company's Willow Run facility was birthing a complete, 4-engine B-24 Liberator bomber every single hour. Imagine that, a B-24 Liberator, a colossal machine of 1.5 million distinct parts, 450,000 rivets, and 30,000 individual components, all converging into an 18-ton behemoth of aerial warfare, rolling from an assembly line at a pace faster than Germany, could manufacture a simple Kübelwagen military car. Standing rigidly at attention before the admiral's desk, Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz had personally triple-verified every piece of this intelligence, yet the numbers stubbornly, terrifyingly, refused to change. What neither of these men could possibly grasp in that moment was how this single report would ignite the most catastrophic intelligence failure of modern warfare: the systemic, deep-rooted inability of German intelligence to comprehend, to believe, or to effectively convey the true, terrifying scale of American industrial power to the Nazi high command, thereby sealing the Third Reich's fate through a fatal misreading of mathematical inevitability. The seeds of this intellectual collapse regarding American production had been sown 2 years earlier. Back in 1941, Luftwaffe General Ernst Udet had presented Hermann Göring with startling reports from the military attaché in Washington, General Friedrich von Bötticher, which claimed American aircraft manufacturing was nearing an astonishing 2,000 planes per month. Göring hadn't just dismissed it. He had erupted in laughter, a genuine, booming laugh, proclaiming that Americans were only capable of making refrigerators and razor blades, not sophisticated instruments of war. The Americans are bluffing, Göring had confidently assured Hitler at the Wolf's Lair in December 1941, a mere 4 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Their democracy renders them weak. Their mongrelized population makes them inefficient. Their Jews ensure they are corrupt. They cannot possibly produce what they claim. But now, by March of 1943, a torrent of reports from German intelligence networks spanning the Americas was painting a picture that shattered every core assumption of Nazi racial theory and economic doctrine. The information flowed from a dozen different streams: Mexican industrialists with pro-German sympathies, Spanish diplomats moving in high circles, Swedish businessmen on tours of Detroit, even intercepted private letters from American factory workers to their families in neutral nations. They all echoed the same impossible truth. Ford's Willow Run plant, on its own, was outproducing the combined output of every single aircraft factory in all of Germany. Oberstleutnant Nikolaus Ritter, the head of the Abwehr's Air Intelligence Section, had immersed himself in this data for 3 agonizing weeks. As a former Lufthansa pilot who had resided in America for a decade before the war, Ritter possessed a unique understanding of American industrial might that few other German officers could claim. His Manhattan apartment in the 1920s had offered a direct view of the Chrysler Building's construction. He had witnessed with his own eyes as Americans raised the world's tallest skyscraper in under 2 years. Herr Admiral, Ritter now reported to Canaris, his voice heavy with the gravity of his conclusion, if these figures are accurate, and I am convinced they are, then Germany has already lost this war. It is now nothing more than a question of mathematics and of time. The intelligence itself had traveled through a labyrinth of dangerous and clandestine routes. Georg Nicholas, who orchestrated the Abwehr's primary network out of Mexico City, had carefully nurtured sources among American businessmen who journeyed freely between Detroit's industrial heartland and Mexico's vital oil fields. These men, over drinks and dinner, spoke casually of industrial miracles they had seen, completely oblivious to the fact that their conversations were being meticulously transcribed by German agents. On the night of February 3, 1943, an American oil executive named Harold Morrison found himself at a reception hosted by the German-Mexican Commerce Association in Mexico City. After the loosening effect of several tequilas, Morrison began to vividly describe a recent tour of the Willow Run facility, a tour Ford had arranged to dazzle potential investors with the company's sheer capability to fulfill massive government contracts. "Gentlemen," Morrison had declared, his words flowing freely, never suspecting that Wolfgang Blaum, a German agent masquerading as an Argentine leather merchant, was committing every syllable to memory. "What I witnessed there simply defies description. The assembly line is over a mile long. The main building is so unimaginably vast that clouds literally form near the ceiling, and I was told it sometimes rains inside the factory. They employ 42,000 workers, thousands of them women, even Negro women, building the most complex machine mankind has ever devised." Morrison then grabbed a pencil, sketching frantically on a cocktail napkin. "The bomber has 2 bomb bays, each capable of carrying 4,000 pounds of ordnance. It has 4 engines, each generating 200 horsepower. And the way they build them, they produce them in massive sections, sub-assemblies, Ford calls them, that converge on the main line like great rivers flowing into a sea. Wing sections glide in from one direction, fuselages from another, tail assemblies from a third. They all meet at precise points, at precise times." Blaum, the agent, had interjected with an air of casual curiosity, "But surely such complexity must lead to frequent breakdowns, to constant production delays?" Morrison had let out a hearty laugh. "That's precisely what Consolidated Aircraft thought. They scoffed at Ford, said you can't build airplanes like you build automobiles. But Ford broke the entire bomber down into 60,000 separate, distinct operations. Each worker performs the exact same task over and over and over. A woman who just yesterday was making breakfast for her children is now expertly installing hydraulic lines in the tail section. They train these people in mere days, not months." Perhaps the most granular and detailed intelligence, however, flowed through Francisco Franco's Spain. Colonel José Ungría, the Spanish military attaché in Washington, deftly maintained warm relations with American aircraft manufacturers while secretly funneling a steady stream of intelligence back to Germany in exchange for shipments of tungsten, a mineral critical to Spanish industry. In March 1943, Ungría attended a reception at the Argentine embassy where he found himself in conversation with Charles Sorensen, Ford's legendary production chief and the very architect of Willow Run. Sorensen, believing he was speaking to a representative of a neutral power that might become a customer for aircraft after the war, spoke with unguarded frankness about the plant's breathtaking capabilities. "Colonel," Sorensen had stated, unaware that his every word would be on a desk in Berlin within 2 weeks, "when I first visited Consolidated's San Diego plant back in 1940, they were literally building B-24s outdoors in the sunshine. Each one was a custom job, different from the last, taking a staggering 180,000 man-hours per aircraft. I just knew, we could do better." Ungría, citing a professional interest as a military engineer, pressed for more details. Sorensen, swelling with pride at his monumental achievement, was more than happy to oblige. "I spent a single night in my hotel room in San Diego, sketching out the entire production flow on a piece of paper. We would build bombers just as we build cars, not by having swarms of workers moving around a stationary aircraft, but by moving the aircraft past stationary workers. Each worker would perform a specific repetitive task, achieving a state of perfection through sheer repetition." The Spaniard then inquired about the challenge of finding a workforce for such a complex operation. "We constructed an apprentice school that trains 8,000 new workers every single week. Sorensen replied matter-of-factly. Women make up 40% of our workforce. They are actually superior at detailed work, smaller hands for tight spaces, more patience for repetitive tasks. We have Negro workers operating the most sophisticated machinery. We have boys of 16 managing supply logistics. Democracy, Colonel, means utilizing every last drop of available human resources. Through Swedish, Argentine, Japanese, and Turkish diplomatic channels, German intelligence continued to receive a steady flow of reports, each one confirming Willow Run's unbelievable production rate. A Swedish engineer, Erik Lundberg, who visited the plant in March 1943, reported, "The plant operates with an efficiency that simply defies European comprehension. They employ 1,600 specialized machine tools, many custom-designed for a single operation. The capital investment is staggering, perhaps $200 million for the tooling alone." A coded message from Japanese commander Toshikazu Omae to Tokyo, intercepted and decoded by German intelligence, provided chilling independent verification. This single American factory produces more aircraft monthly than the entire Japanese aviation industry. Sita. By April 1943, German intelligence had meticulously compiled a comprehensive dossier, drawing from 17 independent and credible sources, all confirming the production rate. The numbers were beyond staggering. Willow Run, by itself, was producing 650 B-24s per month at its peak, while the total American B-24 production exceeded 1,400 bombers monthly. Desperate for some form of ground truth, some tangible proof, Canaris authorized Operation Pastorius, the insertion of saboteurs into the United States via submarine. George John Dash, the leader of one of the two four-man teams, had lived in America for 20 years before returning to Germany in 1939. His secret orders from Canaris were explicit: gather first-hand intelligence on aircraft production before undertaking any acts of sabotage. In the pre-dawn darkness of June 13, 1942, Dash's team slipped ashore at Amagansett, Long Island, having been ferried from the U-202 just after midnight. Within days, however, tormented by the implications of his mission and what he already knew to be true about America's industrial power, Dash surrendered himself to the FBI. During his interrogation, Dash revealed something that left his American captors stunned. "Canaris himself told me that Berlin doesn't believe your production figures. They think Willow Run is a propaganda stunt. He wanted photographs, employee counts, shipping records, any proof that would force Göring to accept the terrifying reality." FBI Special Agent Charles Landman asked in disbelief, "They don't believe we're producing a bomber an hour?" Dash let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "Agent Landman, I lived here. I've seen your automobile factories. I tried to tell them that if Ford could produce a car every minute before the war, they could certainly produce a bomber every hour during it. They accused me of being a defeatist." On April 20, 1943, Hitler's 54th birthday, Canaris took the ultimate risk and personally presented this mountain of intelligence to Göring at Karenhall, the Reichsmarschall's grotesquely opulent hunting estate north of Berlin. The meeting would become the stuff of legend among German intelligence officers, a textbook example of Göring's complete and utter detachment from reality. Canaris had brought everything: photographs, intercepted documents, detailed reports from dozens of sources. He spread them across Göring's massive oak table like a gambler laying down a hand of cards that he knew would lose the entire game. "Herr Reichsmarschall," Canaris began, choosing his words with extreme care, "we have confirmation from 17 independent sources. The Ford Willow Run plant is producing one B-24 Liberator every hour at peak production. They have sustained this rate consistently since January." Göring, whose weight had ballooned to over 280 pounds by this point in the war, languidly picked up one of the photographs, a shot showing the assembly line stretching away into an almost infinite distance. "Canaris," Göring sneered with undisguised contempt, Do you truly take me for a fool? These are obviously wooden mock-ups, props for a propaganda film. The Americans want us to believe they can build aircraft like they make sausages. This Willow Run plant of theirs probably produces 50 bombers a month at the very most. Canaris, refusing to yield, produced another document, an intercepted shipping manifest from the Pennsylvania Railroad detailing aluminum shipments. Herr Reichsmarschall, they are consuming 16 million pounds of aluminum every month at this one plant alone. That is more than our entire national monthly production. Göring roared with laughter, a harsh, grating sound. Then where do they get this aluminum? From their Negro workers? From their women riveters? Canaris, you have been thoroughly deceived by American propaganda. A week later, Canaris was summoned to the Wolf's Lair to brief Hitler personally. The meeting was a somber affair, attended by Generals Jodl and Keitel, and Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels. Hitler, who was poring over maps of the Eastern Front where the Wehrmacht was gearing up for Operation Citadel, the Battle of Kursk, listened with palpable impatience as Canaris laid out the grim intelligence. "Mein Führer," Canaris said, fully aware that he was risking his very life. "If the Americans are producing 1,400 B-24s monthly, plus an equal number of B-17s, plus their fighter aircraft, plus British production, the aerial bombardment of the Reich will soon overwhelm our defensive capabilities." Hitler's response was brutally characteristic. "Admiral, the Americans are capable of mass-producing simple goods, automobiles, refrigerators, but a heavy bomber is not a car. It requires precision, skill, a special dedication. It took us 6 years to prepare for this war, and they claim to have achieved this in 16 months. It is utterly impossible." General Jodl, studying Canaris's figures, began to make a quick calculation on a notepad. "Even if we accept just 1/4 of these figures as accurate—" "The figures are false," Hitler interrupted, his voice rising. "The Americans only entered this war in December 1941. To build this miraculous factory and achieve this level of production in such a short time is a physical impossibility." Unknown to the Nazi leadership, Canaris had gone a step further and obtained actual film footage of Willow Run in operation, passed to him through American intelligence contacts in Switzerland. The film, smuggled into Germany via a Spanish diplomatic pouch, showed 5 minutes of the assembly line in full, relentless motion. In a locked room deep within Abwehr headquarters, Canaris and his deputy, Hans Oster, watched the film. The camera glided along the entire mile-long assembly line. B-24s in every conceivable stage of construction moved past at a steady, inexorable pace. Workers, men, women, black, white, performed their tasks with a kind of mechanical, hypnotic precision. A large clock, visible in several shots, confirmed the impossible timing. "My God," Oster whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's all true." Canaris then held the film reel to his cigarette lighter, watching silently as the truth turned to ash and smoke. "We can never show this to them," he said quietly. "They would accuse us of creating fake footage, or worse, of being traitors." In November 1943, German intelligence acquired aerial reconnaissance photographs of Willow Run, taken by a sympathetic Spanish diplomat. Photo analysts pored over the images for weeks. Their conclusions were unambiguous. The parking lots contained approximately 12,000 cars, indicating a full 3-shift operation. Completed B-24s were clearly visible at the adjacent airfield. 47 aircraft, ready for delivery. The assembly line itself was visible through the factory's skylights. The aircraft spaced exactly as the human intelligence had reported. Rail sidings were crowded with dozens of freight cars, delivering a constant stream of materials. Hauptmann Werner Baumbach wrote in the final analysis, "Photographic evidence confirms human intelligence. The reported production rate appears to be accurate. We recommend an immediate and drastic strategic reassessment." When shown the photographs, Göring contemptuously dismissed them as a clever American trick, a sophisticated form of photographic manipulation, probably using scale models. Dr. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister and the only member of the Nazi High Command with a genuine practical understanding of industrial production, secretly obtained copies of the American intelligence reports. His diary entry for May 15, 1943, discovered after the war, reveals the depth of his private despair. If the Willow Run figures are even half accurate, we are facing not just defeat, but utter annihilation. They produce more aircraft in a single month than we do in an entire year. But I cannot speak this truth. To do so would be to sign my own death warrant. Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, head of the SD Inland and a trained economist, conducted his own analysis of American economic data. His report to Himmler in December 1943 was stark and devoid of ideology. The Ford Motor Company's peacetime production in 1941 was 1.1 million vehicles. They have successfully converted this capacity to bomber production. At current rates, by June 1944, the Americans will have produced enough B-24s alone to drop our entire 1940 London bombing tonnage on Germany every single day. On Christmas Eve 1943, Canaris received the latest intelligence, showing American production projections for 1944. B-24 Liberators, 18,000. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 12,000. B-29 Superfortresses, 1,000. Fighter aircraft, 40,000. A total of 86,000 aircraft in a single year. Hitler's response when presented with these figures was a simple dismissive statement. The Americans claim they will produce more aircraft in 1944 than all nations combined have produced in all of history. It is absurd. By February 1944, Canaris was removed from his position, suspected of defeatism and treason. His replacement, Walter Schellenberg, was a loyal Nazi sycophant who knew better than to ever contradict Hitler or Göring. But reality, unlike a subordinate, cannot be dismissed forever. On February 20, 1944, the beginning of Big Week, the American 8th Air Force launched Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In 6 days, they dropped more bomb tonnage on Germany than the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Luftwaffe fighter ace Adolf Galland famously told Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I have personally counted over 800 bombers in a single formation. These planes are real, and I assure you they are dropping real bombs." On June 6, 1944, over 11,000 Allied aircraft filled the skies over France. The once mighty Luftwaffe could muster fewer than 300 fighters to oppose them. Field Marshal Hugo Sperl sent a desperate, frantic message to Berlin. "The enemy's aerial superiority is absolute. Our intelligence was correct all along. We were deceived not by the Americans, but by ourselves." By April 1944, Willow Run had achieved its peak production rate. In that month, its employees, working in 2 9-hour shifts, 6 days a week, produced an astonishing 453 airplanes in 468 hours, a production rate equal to one finished B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. The plant employed 42,131 workers, a demographic that would have utterly shattered the foundations of Nazi racial ideology. 11,000 of them were women, 26% of the workforce. 3,800 were African Americans, 9% of the workforce, and 1,200 were classified as disabled workers, 3% of the workforce. The so-called inferior races and the weaker sex were outproducing the German master race by orders of magnitude. After the war, surviving German intelligence officers laid bare the full scope of this catastrophic failure. Walter Schellenberg testified at Nuremberg, "We knew the truth about American production by early 1943. Every professional intelligence officer understood that the numbers were accurate. But to report this truth was to risk immediate execution for defeatism." Hans Bernd Gisevius wrote in his memoirs, The tragedy was not that we lacked intelligence about American production. We were drowning in it. The tragedy was that our leadership refused to believe it, simply because it contradicted their deeply held racial ideology. The German intelligence officers who had tried to report the truth paid the ultimate price. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris was executed on April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp. Hans Oster was executed on the same day, at the same place. Alexis von Roen was executed in October 1944 for his involvement in the July 20th plot. Hans Bernd Gisevius managed to escape to Switzerland and survived the war. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed everything German intelligence had reported, and their leaders had denied. Willow Run produced a total of 8,685 B-24s between 1942 and 1945. Its peak production reached 650 aircraft in a single month. The rate of one bomber per hour was sustained for months on end. The total cost per aircraft plummeted from $238,000 to just $137,000. Albert Speer, in a post-war interrogation, was asked why Germany refused to believe the intelligence about American production. He responded, "To accept that Ford could produce a bomber every hour was to accept that our entire worldview was fundamentally wrong. It meant accepting that democracy wasn't weak but strong, that racial mixing didn't create weakness but strength, that women could do men's work. It would mean accepting that we had started a war we could never, ever win. And who among us was going to tell Hitler that?" Rose Will Monroe, the real-life inspiration for Rosie the Riveter, operated a rivet gun on the B-24 production line at Willow Run. She, and thousands of women just like her, had never worked in heavy industry before Pearl Harbor. "We knew we were building something important," Monroe recalled in a 1984 interview. "Every rivet we drove was going to help end the war. We worked double shifts sometimes, sleeping in the parking lot between shifts. We had brothers, husbands, and sweethearts flying in these very planes." The failure to believe the intelligence about Willow Run had cascading, catastrophic consequences. Fighter production. Germany continued to prioritize bomber production until late 1944. Resource allocation. Precious resources were squandered on wonder weapons instead of practical air defenses. Strategic planning. Military operations were planned to counter hundreds of bombers, not thousands. Diplomatic failures. Potential peace overtures were delayed because the leadership did not understand the certainty of their coming defeat. German economists, analyzing captured American documents, finally grasped the true scale of the disparity. Willow Run had cost $200 million to build. The entire German aircraft industry investment from 1933 to 1945 was the equivalent of $400 million. Willow Run's floor space was 3.5 million square feet. All German aircraft factories combined totaled 8 million square feet. Willow Run's monthly electrical consumption was 2.5 million kilowatt-hours. The Americans had built a single factory that consumed more resources than entire German cities. The final accounting, tallied by the war's end, revealed the full, devastating picture. Total B-24s produced, 18,188, with Willow Run building 8,685 of them. Total B-17s produced, 12,731. Total. American aircraft produced from 1940 to 1945, 303,717. Total. German aircraft produced from 1940 to 1945, 94,700. The United States had produced 3.2 times more aircraft than Germany while simultaneously fighting a two-ocean war. Historians now call the German intelligence failure regarding American production one of the most consequential in all of military history. It was not a failure of collection. German agents gathered remarkably accurate and detailed intelligence. It was a failure of acceptance, a failure of a leadership that refused to believe any intelligence that contradicted their cherished worldview. Dr. Gerhard Weinberg concluded, German intelligence had accurately assessed American production capacity by early 1943. Had this intelligence been believed and acted upon, Germany might have sought a negotiated peace 2 years earlier. saving millions of lives. This story carries with it profound and timeless lessons. Cognitive bias. Accurate intelligence will always be rejected if it contradicts core beliefs. Ideological blindness. Political ideology can and will override mathematical reality. Systemic failure. Intelligence systems that punish unwelcome truths will only ever receive comfortable lies. And the fatal miscalculation. Underestimating an opponent's capabilities leads to catastrophic, irreversible errors. At the 1985 dedication of the Yankee Air Museum at the old Willow Run site, former Rosie the Riveter, Rose Will Monroe met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans Ulrich Rudel. Rudel asked her, "How did you build so many, so fast?" Monroe simply answered, "Honey, we just went to work every day and did our job. Nothing fancy. Just punch in, build bombers, punch out. Democracy isn't complicated. It's just free people doing their best." Rudel responded with a heavy heart, "We were told that democracy made you weak, that your diversity made you inefficient. We were told lies, and those lies killed millions." In the rubble-strewn ruins of Berlin in May 1945, American intelligence officers discovered a final, unread German intelligence report on Willow Run, dated April 20, 1945, Hitler's last birthday. It read, "Willow Run production confirmed. We reported this truth 2 years ago. We were not believed. Germany dies not from a lack of intelligence, but from a lack of wisdom to believe intelligence that contradicts what we wish to be true. Let future generations learn. Reality does not bend to ideology. Mathematics does not yield to mythology. Truth ignored becomes tragedy." The report was never delivered. By then, Hitler was entombed in his bunker. The 1,000-year Reich had only days left to live, and thousands of American bombers, many of them built at Willow Run, were delivering the final, explosive argument that German intelligence had tried to make 2 years earlier. The verdict of history is clear. German intelligence collection was excellent. German intelligence acceptance was catastrophic. And in that fundamental failure to believe uncomfortable truths lies a stark warning for all nations, in all times. Reality does not care what you believe. Those who deny reality in favor of ideology will ultimately be destroyed by it. Willow Run built more than just bombers. It built the undeniable proof that democracy works, that diversity strengthens, and that freedom produces. German spies counted every last one of them. German leaders believed none of it. And that disbelief killed the Third Reich as surely as any bomb ever could.